Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Comics. This time around, we are looking at a different character. This time, we are looking at Walter West, or Wally West, as he is better known. Especially if you've been following the Arrow TV series, you've definitely heard of him, and you might know him as Kid Flash. However, you have to remember that this is a much older character. Unlike the one we covered 2 episodes ago before the intermission of last time, when we talked about the 1990s Green Lantern, where we talked about Kyle Rayner, Wally is not a newcomer into the comic book scene. In fact, he is pretty much um a staple of the Flash universe since a long time ago. His first appearance was actually as Kid Flash back in December of 1959 in the Flash number 110. Now, this is a long time ago, as you can probably tell. Now, important, um, Wally West, or Wallace Rudolph West, which is his full uh, name, he is a nephew of Barry Allen. Now, nephew on the side of his wife. Hmm? Um, so it's not. It gets complicated. Okay, so now he is in 1990s. He's the Flash, and to talk about Wally West, we have to go back to the Crisis on Infinite Earths back in 1985, where we get um, part of this death of Barry Allen, um, which, if you've been following the TV series, it is referenced there. Now, his his disappearance during the Crisis on Infinite Earth, um, Flash Barry was running to try and stop the crisis, and he was somehow incorporated or dissolved into the Speed Force, right? And oh, sorry about that. My cat is throwing a fit because we haven't left the house in 4 months. So he is a little bit upset over that. Now, when we go back to Crisis on Infinite Earths, we get we get um see, I lost my train of thought completely. My music ran out, and everything just went to hell in a handbasket. I haven't done this in a while. Sorry about this. Going back on the Crisis on Infinite Earths, Barry um, sacrifices himself to save the multiverse. Now, you got to be careful with this because we all know that death is not a permanent thing in in comic books, right? Um, and well, you characters come and go, and a lot of people have accused Superman of being responsible for um, destroying the the superhero comic genre because he died and was reborn. That's been happening all the time. Uh, Comic book writers find a way to keep their characters alive, and but if they can't die, then there's no fun in the stories. And also because a part of what makes them heroic is their willingness to sacrifice themselves to pay the ultimate price, if you will, right? So when you have something like that, and you've got the characters who sacrifice themselves, then you get this heroic persona that is there. Now, while it is true that Barry Allen died more than once, he was murdered by Cobalt Blue. But this was at a point where Wally had altered the timeline because speedsters can travel through time. So there's a bunch of little things, but when we talk about the death of the Flash, we are referring specifically to this issue. And you can see it right here. The Crisis on Infinite Earths, the final fate of the Flash. And this is where we get Barry Allen sacrificing himself to save the multiverse. And let me just zoom in here. This is Barry Allen having knocked the living daylights out of this guy. So now I'm not going to get into details because I will probably be attempting an episode on the Crisis on Infinite Earths, but not right now. Now, Psycho Pirate, which is the guy that's on the cover, plays a key role in the Flash timeline. Now, I'm looking for the specific. This is probably one of the most famous spread of pages for the Flash. Is the exact moment where he dies, and I'm looking to see if I can show it to you. Now, granted, it's not going to be very detailed, so because of the size of the pages, and this is the one. Now, up in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the moment where Flash is slowly turning into dust as he runs. And I'm going to go back to the previous page. This is Flash running in circles around the power source of the cannon is there, and he's saying the last here, there's more than my life at stake. But then here he dies, right? We see him destroying the cannon of the Anti-Monitor, And then we get our glimpse of Wally West here. Let's see if I can get this to display properly. There. And the monitor's opening some temporal portal. Gotta keep running, Barry. Got to keep running. And then he sees Wally. Wally as Kid Flash. And Wally is seeing Flash as he dies. And says, I'm going back through time. Right? And we get a few, it's a recap of what the Flash did, or better yet, didn't do. Did or didn't do up until that point. Now, important, if you see it, is that in the aftermath of the Crisis on Infinite Earths, you get the Flash. Now, Wally is gone. Barry is gone. There's no more Flash, but there is Kid Flash. And the thing with the Crisis on Infinite Earths is that many things changed, and many characters, a lot of characters, don't remember the events of the Crisis. They know that things have changed. They realize that there's something different, but they're not entirely sure what it is that has changed, if you will. So we have that intermission there. But we got it. I mean, we get Wally West as the new Flash. He picks up the mantle left by his uncle, but more than uncle, his mentor, his friend. You got to remember, from 1959 to 1985, Wally West joined Barry Allen in the fight against crime in Central City. And just like his predecessor, his power is the Speed Force. He is endowed with the Speed Force. Now, there's a lot of things that change, and this has to do with the changes that DC Comics was trying to do to its superheroes in the 1990s. And you got to remember, again, that this has a lot to do with the generational renewal of comic books. Think about this. The first readers of comic books were the children, kids, roughly around 9-10 years of age, of the late 1930s, right? They were reading Superman and Batman, and the Captain America and Justice Society. But by the 1980s, those people were 50 years old. 45, 50 years old. And readership was different. And they had to revamp and somehow bring a new age, if you will, to the comic books. And that's partially what motivated the Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's We need to turn this around. We need new characters. Now, it is so after Crisis on Infinite Earths, a lot of series got new number ones, and The Flash was not an exception. The Flash was not the exception, it was part of it. And Wally West assumes the mantle that was born that Barry had kept, right? Now the very first villain that he has to face is Vandal Savage, which is this immortal um, supervillain who has been a pain on every DC superhero ever. Now, mm, we get The Flash number one. The Flash number one is the issue where he makes his debut in 1987 as The Flash, and this was the breakthrough. Now, what is important about this new Flash is that this is the entire change. Now, as I said, I'm going to talk about him in the 1990s. So I'm going to skip the first few years and I'm going to go into roughly the time where Kyle Rayner becomes Green Lantern because these two are something new that breaks into the DC universe. And it has to do with their youth. They are the new generation of superheroes. They are they're picking up the mantle for others. Unlike Superman, for example, who is still Clark Kent, he hasn't changed. The Crisis on Infinite Earths didn't disappear him, didn't change him. Um, it changed his backstory. It changed the explanation of some of his powers, but it didn't really alter who he was. Right here, same thing with Batman. Batman is still Bruce Wayne. His parents were still murdered in Crime Alley by a thug, and the names change, and then we get Batman Year One and those things. But it's the same story, just updated to a newer audience, and it's the same thing that happens later on with Infinite Crisis and Final Crisis and 52 and New 52 and Rebirth and Flashpoint. Those characters don't really. You can't change Superman. You can't change Batman. Their origin stories because that is what makes them who they are. But with characters like Flash and Green Lantern, it is a very, very different story where you totally can. And same thing in Green Lantern, same thing with Green Arrow. Green Arrow is also another one of these characters that is changed for the 1990s, and there's a lot of explaining and things to do. Now, one thing that has to be said for Wally West, he is in the same vein as as Kyle Rayner. He's campier. He's a little bit more immature, if you will, and you can see his jokes and everything. He's a little bit more childish, and he's just as hungry. He's and when you see them together in the pages, for example, of the Justice League, because of course Wally becomes a member of the Justice League along with Kyle. They're immediate friends, and they're immediate friends basically because They are the new guys, right? They are the kids, the little guys. And we get them first. This is one of those odd things. In the pages of Justice League Europe. Justice League Europe was a 1989, start of 1990s attempt of branching out, making the series a little bit more um universal, because the JLA, Justice League of America, well, it's clearly an American comic book. It's clearly aimed at American audiences, and it deals with American issues, whereas they're not the only ones. Now, here's where we get, and we'll show you here, typical Wally West. He has just ran to the JLI, because it's JLE, sorry, Justice League Europe headquarters in Paris. And as he gets there, there's Power Girl. Um, and the first thing he thinks is, Power Girl, all right. Now there's a babe I want to get to know. You know, I thought I was joining up with the League just to get myself a regular paycheck, but you never know. With Power Girl around and Wonder Woman, there just might be some fringe benefits. Um, and then here is the comment that marks this as a 1990s comic book. Hello, Flash. Excited about the big day? And then he replies, I'm excited, honey. But the big day's got nothing to do with it, in a none too subtle sexist comment. Uh, so that's gonna set the tone for Wally, right? He's gonna be all about the girl, pretty much like, again, Green Lantern. Oh, it's all about the late teenager, young adult, young man. Uh, for example, here in that same issue, later on, he meets Wonder Woman, and instead of doing what he should have done and be worried about the situation, as he walks in, he says to Wonder Woman, "You look a little tense, Wonder Woman. Maybe you and I can split a bottle of white wine and talk about it." I mean, we're talking about Wonder Woman here. We're not talking about some random girl on the street. We're talking about somebody who can duke it out with Superman. Okay? Now, sure, Flash can run, and there's always been that question of who's faster, Flash or Superman, and they've raced and everything, but they are not on the same league. Wally is not on the same league as Wonder Woman, definitely. So that's going to be pretty much the sense that you get from Wally, right? Now, later on, when Justice League Europe is disbanded, um, he's going to go into Justice League International, and then just go back to the Justice League of America. Sorry about that. Now, um, we get him back, and he meets up with Kyle Rayner, and they become friends, as I've already mentioned, and we will see, starting with JLA number 1 in 1997, we get a much different Flash, right? That will lead into the Flash of the 2000s. But that issue of the Justice League is indicative of the character that Wally West will have as the Flash. Uh, Now, it's important to realize and remember that this was a new generation, but eventually Barry Allen will return, and that is a subject for a different uh, episode where we get the return of Barry Allen, which is a thing in and on itself because you can't have two Flash, right? I mean, one of them is the Flash. And to be fair, well, Barry is the original, um, Flash. And later on, in later years, he will become even more important. And the Speed Force will have given birth to the Flash in a way. So it's not that easy. Now, here, if to just show you one last thing, is when we're going back to the Justice League of America, um, and we are talking about 1995. And here we go. Here we have a meeting of the Justice League of America, but these guys are the B-listers, if you will. You got Fire, Eyes, Blue Beetle, Booster Gold, the Ray, Maximum, Captain Atom. Then you have Flash, Blue Demon, Nuklon, um, Hawkman, and they're all just sitting around eating, having a bite to eat. So this is the atmosphere and this is the attitude of this new Justice League of America, in which Wally West fits in perfectly. You know, and then there's this whole issue of who is Wonder Woman that I didn't mention in that page. But this issue is important because this is a bringing back of all the Justice Leagues, Justice League International, Justice League of America, and rebonding. And we got alien characters and future characters and characters from the past. It's and a lot of characters that don't show up anywhere else, right? Like Metamorpho, characters who don't have their own series. But then we've got Donna Troy as Wonder Girl, and in the midst of this gigantic intergalactic fight where they have to go and fight the Overmaster, and they're all arguing about it, we get the introduction into the Justice League of Green Lantern. And this is their first meeting. But it's this Green Lantern, Guy Gardner, who is now called Warrior. But this whole period of time between end of 1995 and early 1996 is where you get the turnover, the new generation coming together and rebuilding. Now, in Justice League of America, 107, it's even more new generation characters, because we have Wally West, but we also get Superboy. Superboy, who has no secret identity, who has no name beyond Superboy originally. Um, Basically, because he's a half clone of Superman, and he will eventually be named as Connor Kent because Superman takes him with him. And here in these 2 pages, we got Superboy, and in the next page, we got Kyle Rayner and Wally West. So that was the attempt of DC Comics to revamp, and there's even a new Kid Flash who joins Wally West and will eventually join with the team of speedsters, which is totally a thing. But unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, that is all the time I have for today. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time. But for now, this has been Tadjikant, and I'm out.